The New Hampshire Attorney General's office announced that it is carefully reviewing arguments that could keep Trump off the ballot in the state because of his role in the January 6th Capitol riots. This long-shot effort would be grounded in the 14th Amendment, which disqualifies anyone who is, quote, engaged in insurrection or rebellion, or, quote, given aid or comfort to enemies thereof from holding office. This is what we'll be discussing today on The Left Wing. I'm Dr. Erica Okamoto of the Cocktails and Capitalism podcast, and I'm joined by my co-host, John Cooper of Counterpoint Politics, as well as TJ Whitehead of Power is Taken, Not Given. And we're also joined today by a special guest, Craig of Voices from the Left. Republican New Hampshire attorney Bryant Messner has suggested that he may be filing a legal challenge to Trump's 2024 candidacy that would rely on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. This amendment was created during the Civil War in an effort to prevent members of the Confederacy from holding office. After Messner discussed the issue with Republican Secretary of State David Scanlon, he received a lot of backlash from the state's Republican Party. The party's leader, Chris Agger, stated that the party will, quote, fight to make sure the candidates are not denied access to the ballot. So this is, I'm very happy that this effort is going on, but I'm wondering if you folks think that there's anything unfair about denying someone access to the ballot while there is an investigation ongoing into Trump's role in the January 6th uprising. I mean, we know his role, but what do you guys think about that?
So I think, as someone who thinks Trump is guilty of taking part in insurrection, even if found guilty, I don't think that should disqualify him from the ballot. It should disqualify him once he takes office. I think that's the legal issue that you then have. But I think that the people should still be able to vote for him. I'm not a big fan of anything that stops the democratic will of the people. And I don't think I don't think he'll be Biden anyway, but if he ends up taking office, then that's an issue that everyone in America can sue under the 14th Amendment, and that'll be taken up to the Supreme Court. But I don't think the best way to go about that is to say, okay, no, you just can't vote for this guy. It just goes against my foundational principles of letting the will of the people be heard to its utmost degree. And I don't think that's necessarily the way to go about it, especially if he hasn't been found guilty yet.
Well, yeah, you're right. He has been found guilty because the Republicans, man, surprise, they dropped the ball again, but they could have, rid themselves of Trump during the second impeachment. They could have.
They should have.
I'm actually shocked they didn't do it because the rubes, they love Trump, all the vulgar, licentious crowd, they can't get enough of Donald Trump. But the intelligentsia, to the extent that it exists in the Republican Party, the politicians, the media, the big donors, they despise Trump. They see him as this poisonous albatross around their neck, and they're correct. He is, and he's just sinking the party. I'm shocked that they didn't drop him at that point because, yeah, sure, the people would have been mad, but what are they going to do? They're not going to vote for Democrats, so they should have got rid of him then. But as someone who wants to, see Trump lose, I don't want any efforts taken to bar Trump from running. I don't, because I think Trump is pretty much the only guaranteed victory that we can have against the Republicans. Like anyone else is a dice roll. I think that I mentioned this on the show several times that 2016 Trump won because all the stars aligned for him, and he got lucky that he was running against Hillary Clinton, who didn't galvanize a lot of people. A lot of Democrats didn't even like her, and no one was very few people were really jazzed about going after Clinton, and she was running against this, cartoonish game show host. So no one thought Donald Trump was actually going to win. I know I didn't. I didn't think it could happen. And then it did. And ever since then, though, Republicans have been taking L after L after L after L with Trump as their standard bearer. And, they got their asses kicked in 2018, which was to be expected. That happens all the time. But 2020, they got rocked. 2022, they performed worse than any out of party in 100 years. And it's all because, well, other things too, like Roe v. Wade and everything. But with Trump at the head, people come out to vote against Trump. It's also funny
even when
too,
he's not in office.
even when he's not in office, yeah. Like because they can't get rid of him. And it's really funny to me whenever conservatives be like, yeah, so you guys just didn't vote for Biden, you just voted against Trump. And I was like, yeah, you got me. I mean, yeah, congratulations.
You decided to run him.
Yeah. This isn't that's we're not making that a secret. So if Trump does run, I mean, he will be the nominee if he doesn't die or something, but he will be the nominee next year. And I can't imagine there won't be just a massive wave of people going out just to vote against Trump. It doesn't, Biden doesn't really matter in that. And so trying to stop Trump from running, I think, is the worst thing that we could possibly do.
Yeah. I mean, to John's point about, any unfairness that might happen because he's not technically convicted, or found guilty, whatever it was. It depends on how the actual language in the amendment is written, right? Does it say they have to be an actual convicted, felon or whatever of committing insurrection or however it reads, right? But
engaged in, that's it.
yeah, I mean, engaged in, I mean, that's a pretty broad term, right? So
yeah.
That's easier to prove, but is it keeping him off of one ballot in, the ballot in one state? That's not that big a deal as far as I'm concerned to do it, because people, it's one state, right? If there was a national movement to get him off of every ballot, that would be a bigger deal, right? And have a broader impact, right? And plus people could still write them in, and they probably would, but I'm going to be interested to see what happens in Florida too, because someone just filed a lawsuit in Florida for the exact same thing.
Jesus Christ, what are we doing? Oh
yeah,
my God.
that was last
People
week.
stop.
I think. Yeah, so
I guess it sounds like I kind of disagree with some of you folks, just because I think from my perspective, if Trump wins again, if Trump gets into office again, I think it's like game over for democracy in America.
Snake, are you okay? Snake?
I think it is literally like he's not going to leave willingly. He's not going to just give up his power willingly. He's going to end the fundamental structures of power and completely reform the fundamental structures of power in this country. He's such an egomaniacal, megalomaniacal fucking monster. And I mean, I think that I did a lot of reading about Hitler's rise to power and how he used the beer hall putsch and that failed coup to kind of drum up support across the nation around the world. And he used his time behind bars to write Mein Kampf. He spent all this time basically using these attacks against him to skyrocket him to a position where he could really just take over the entire country and start going to war with everyone. And while I do think that, yes, people will show up to vote against Trump, the risk of him actually getting into office, I think, is so big that I think we need to be looking at things like, is it okay for someone who has encouraged and engaged in an insurrection to be the president of America? That, right. Even the fact that we're having that conversation is insane to me. How could someone who did this ever even get anywhere near that position of power? But yet he might be president again. And what's going to happen then could be really dark.
Erica, you gave a historical example, and I'm going to give you the opposite historical example. And very rarely has Hitler ever been compared to Mandela, but you could use that same series of events to describe Nelson Mandela. He engaged in a violent insurrection against the government. He went to prison. He became president. It worked out good that time. And I don't, that's why I say I don't like the complete, maybe I'm being a fucking liberal who loves their institutions. Maybe I am, but I don't love the idea of fucking with the instruments of democratic election to stop him from becoming president. I totally see an argument for doing this on a nationwide scale if he gets convicted, because I can get behind that for sure. But until he's convicted, I don't like the idea of independent states going rogue and saying this guy can't be on the ballot because he's under investigation for XYZ. Because like if you did that in the opposite direction, I'd be fucking pissed about it. And I don't think it's fair to do something that I'd be fucking pissed at if it was in the opposite direction, just because I'm 99.9% confident that I'm right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think to your point, like limitations on freedoms often are directed towards leftists much more strongly than they are directed towards people on the right. So if we aren't going to let someone run for president who has maybe engaged in, protests against the government, then there could be a leftist in that position in the future that I want to be in charge, So yeah, I hear what you're saying for sure. But I still think it's worth looking into this avenue because it's there in their Constitution, in the 14th Amendment. And, if it's there, fucking try it out.
And I do agree with TJ that like electorally, I don't think it's the best. Like, strategically, I don't think it's the best option.
It is, Erica's right. It is high risk, but I mean, the consequences of being wrong are, catastrophic, but I just think the odds of it happening are just so low. That's how I look at it. So
I also
that was last Trump.
See, it was last Trump, but here's the way I actually think about it. Like, and maybe I hope I'm wrong about this, but I don't think the disease is Trump. I think Trump opened the floodgates for exactly what you're talking about, of a fascist takeover of the United States government. But I don't think he intended to do that. I don't think Trump is a fascist. I think he's an authoritarian when it benefits him. But like, I don't think he actually cares about it. Like I've said before, like how like DeSantis is my worst nightmare because he wants that. If DeSantis takes power, that's a problem because he will try and institutionalize a fascist takeover of America. Trump, I think, will just sort of fill out his term and be like, I won, and take a victory tour for 4 years. And I don't think he's competent enough to actually pull it off. And that's I think anyone who takes over from the GOP actually has a better chance of successfully pulling off never getting out of power than Donald Trump actually will. And that's me reading tea leaves. I have no evidence for this. I have done no studies on this, but just like my gut instinct is the most important thing is to make sure the GOP doesn't win. And the best chance of that happening is if Trump is the Republican nominee. That's the strategy side though,
I also think that Trump has an advantage that cannot be duplicated, in that he is a cult leader and that people will die for him. And like if Ron DeSantis loses and tries to give it, he's not going to get a rally of people to storm the Capitol for him. That's not going to happen. And it's funny because like he would be serious about it when Trump is like, hey, let's see if this works. Like Trump has lived his entire life without paying any consequences. But any other politician that does the stuff Trump pulled off would, plummet in the polls, even among their own supporters. But Trump is just unique in that way. So until another, extremely charismatic celebrity comes along, I'm less afraid of them pulling off what Trump was able to pull off.
Kanye 2024, what up?
Yeah, Kanye.
Oh God. Oh God.